Dishonest landlord gets fined $50,000 with Bill 184. A Toronto landlord gets fined $135,000 for illegal eviction of tenants. Brampton landlord fined $12,000 for wearing shoes. So you have a lot of headlines like that. And becoming a landlord, there's a lot of laws, there's a lot of misconceptions. So you should watch this video so you don't end up as a headline. If you're not aware, the rental market is absolutely hot right now. And tenants seem to be happy with any of it. I've seen tenants agree to pay for a full year upfront rent payment, which is absolutely insane. And I've seen some questionable demands, borderline illegal. So I'm meeting with Beta from Stonegate Law Services so that I can ask some questions that you guys asked me, address some of the things that I've been seeing in the market. As a real estate agent, we want to make sure we advise our clients to do the right things. We don't want them to end up in a sticky situation. Now, before I head there, this is for entertainment purposes only. This video is not meant to give advice in any way, shape, or form. So watch it for entertainment, and if you have any questions and you want them answered, I'm gonna leave her links in the description, and I'll leave my info in there as well, so you can reach out to us. Okay, I made it going up right now. We're here. Perfect. So Beta, we are real estate agents. We are not lawyers, so we shouldn't give people advice. We shouldn't even attempt to do so. However, because the market's been very insane, we've started seeing we real estate agents get creative sometimes. We come up with some really long schedules and we want to comfort our clients, so we get creatives. So I've been seeing some things that I wanted to address.
That thing's cool.
It is. You should get one of these. You're gonna notice some themes going on in my questions, and most of it is basically when the tenant agreed to something, what if then the tenant comes back and changes their mind? Do they have any recourse? Do they have any power over the landlord, or did they agree to whatever we've agreed to? So you're gonna see a similar theme with the questions in here, okay? So my first question is, can the landlord ask the tenant to shovel the snow and cut the grass?
So the landlord can ask whatever they want.
Okay.
Okay. So is it lawful? Okay. So that's the question.
That's the question.
Is it lawful? If it's in the lease, which it commonly is, that
yes,
the landlord wants to offset all maintenance obligations to the tenant.
Yeah.
Even if the tenant agrees, the Residential Tenancies Act, it basically trumps the contract. Section 20 and 21 of the Residential Tenancies Act makes reference to maintenance.
Okay.
So the act doesn't say who is responsible for snow removal or grass cutting.
Okay.
Because that's directly saying what the responsibility is. The act says that a landlord is responsible to maintain and repair.
Okay.
So snow removal, grass cutting, salting
part of that
falls under maintenance, which is the landlord's responsibility.
And there's liability there as well, because if you ask the tenant to shovel the snow and they don't shovel, what happens?
Well, that's a good question. The landlord opens themselves to liability.
Okay.
Now, the way to go around it is the lease can be the lease, right? You can contract, as a landlord, you can contract that responsibility to the tenant.
Oh, so you're asking them, you're now my contractor to do the snow.
You got it.
So now the tenant is liable if they don't do it because they're not upholding their contract.
You got it. So the rent would remain the same.
That's just a different agreement.
Different agreement.
Okay.
The contractor's agreement, which you can find a copy of a blank one on landlordmastery.ca.
Okay, this is your website.
You got it. And you can fill in the responsibilities that you want, but never deduct payment for that fee from the rent, because they're two separate.
So you need to get the full payment for it, and then also reimburse, pay the tenant separately as a contract. Got you. Okay, that's a good one.
Really, the tenant is the contractor.
Correct.
Right?
Or you can hire anybody else, but technically you're hiring. Got you.
Got it.
Okay, very cool. This is another one I've been seeing, because some condos now have very fancy fob systems and they're supposed to be more expensive. So landlord's been asking for $300, $400 for key deposits. Now, if I'm not wrong, on the Ontario Standard Lease, it says you can only take $200 as a deposit.
So the Ontario Standard Lease doesn't make a direct reference with respect to how much you can ask. Okay? Now, the only legal deposit that a landlord can obtain, in addition to a key deposit, is the last month's rent deposit.
Yes.
Any other deposit is
Is
illegal.
illegal. Okay.
The key deposit is
Okay.
legal, provided that it's refundable, and provided that it only covers the cost to replace the front door key. So
Oh,
not the
okay.
fob,
Oh.
not the exercise room key, not the locker room key, not the garage remote.
Okay.
Only the cost to
To replace the front door key.
That's
it.
it. Not the locking mechanism, not the hinges, just
Get
that
an
key.
extra key.
You
So
got
let's say the landlord gave one key to the tenant and they lost theirs, and the tenant also lost theirs. So now we have to replace the entire lock. That's not covering.
Correct.
So you're only
That's an expense of the landlord if you have to change the lock.
okay. So you're only paying for the tenant is only paying to replace that specific key, which is
You got
very
it.
cheap. If you go to Home Depot,
got
like
it.
$20 or something.
And it's often not worth it to put it in your lease agreement because it's
Right.
what, $5-10.
Okay, so what happens if then you ask for $400 and say, oh, it's to replace fobs, keys, this and that?
So even if the tenant agrees,
Okay.
even if the tenant pays,
Okay.
the tenant can bring forward an application through the board and request a refund.
Okay, so even if they don't go through the board, let's say the tenant gets the keys, they
Yeah.
move in, and then they give you a call and say, hey, bring me back the rest of the money. Can they do that?
They can do that. It's happened before.
Oh, wow. Okay,
And
that's
sometimes
new
the
to
landlord says
Gets confused,
no,
yeah.
or they get confused, and then they call the board, and the board says, "Hey,
You
it's
should
not
have
legal." That's right.
Wow, okay, that's
That's
new
right.
to me.
Right.
Okay, that's very interesting. So don't ask for more, and it's not really necessary,
You got it.
technically speaking. You can't
You
use
got
it for pet deposits. You can't use it for damages. You gotta
No
give them
children's deposit.
Yeah.
Believe me, I've seen
children's deposit.
Yeah, no light bulb deposit. None of that.
You've seen more
I've
stuff
seen
than I
more
would ever
stuff.
probably uncover in my life. I don't know where I read this, but would the tenant be responsible to taking out the garbage? And what if they don't take out the garbage? Let's say there's a tenant upstairs on the main floor, and you also rented the basement. So now you have two tenants. They're fighting. No one's taking the actual bins out. They're fighting. They're leaving trash. Oh,
So those are
this is
the
a
worst
good one.
types of rental properties where
Okay.
one tenant lives on the main floor and one in the basement.
Okay.
Because the landlord now becomes the referee,
Right.
right? So when you're
Splitting.
splitting it,
Okay.
often there's issues with noise, there's issues with odors, garbage, and then the
Okay.
tenants take a position, and now the landlord has to come and remove
Mediate.
the garbage. And
Oh, okay. So if
at the end of the day, it's the landlord's property, right?
so if they leave the bins in the garage, the landlord has to go take the bins out
They don't have to. I mean, if they want to prevent the property from
from
attracting
got you.
rodents,
I mean, how many
rats.
years of garbage can you collect?
That's
Okay,
right.
okay. I should have not asked
That's
this
right.
question.
Actually, it was a great question.
It was a good one.
Great
Okay,
question.
okay. It's one of those things. Like in a condo, you toss it in the garbage chute and it's gone.
Yeah.
But I've seen problems arise when there's no clear guidelines on who's taking the bins out, and
That's
then
right.
one of them says, "Why am I taking the bins out?"
For both of us.
For both of us.
Yeah.
And then the other one says, "I don't care.
That's
I've
right.
never asked to do it."
That's
so
right.
done.
I don't
Okay.
even like this person, and now the
Have
landlord's
fun.
like, now
Okay,
I have to
okay.
go take these people's garbage out.
This one is interesting because I've had landlords that did not increase rent in the past year or two, but now their properties are rent controlled and they're thinking, okay, the tenant's not moving out, so might as well catch up on that rent. Okay, I kind of know your answer. So you cannot raise, let's say 2 years ago it was 1.5, this year's 2.5. Can you do 4% and say I didn't raise it last
So
time?
you cannot it's not retroactive.
Not retroactive. So
Yeah.
you have that once a year you can increase the rent.
Correct.
12 months has to pass.
Use it or lose it.
Done.
Done.
Now you can do it 13, 14 months in,
That's
but
correct.
then it will reset for another year, so you cannot increase again for
Correct.
another. Got
So
you.
rent can be increased with 90 days notice to the tenant
Yes.
from the last increase or from the start of the
Weird.
tenancy.
Got you. Got
Okay.
you. Okay.
If you don't use it,
It's
you
done.
lose it.
Okay.
Okay?
Now that's not the case with non-rent controlled.
Correct.
The rule still applies 1 year from the tenancy, but the amount is as much, like almost market value plus you can.
I say within
reasonable
reason. Yeah.
within reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Within reason, you're not going to have a problem.
If you raise it by $5,000 a month, then the
tenant doesn't pay, and then the landlord has to go through the board, and then you're letting an adjudicator decide
if that was
fate.
Normal. Okay,
right.
got you. Okay, this question a lot of people asked: if you're watching this video and you do not like or subscribe, would the tenant and landlord board be able to fine you? Is there a possibility?
It's a slight possibility that
So
if
there
you
is
don't like this video or subscribe to
you
the
might
channel,
get fined.
that you will get fined.
Okay, so just to be safe, go ahead, just like and subscribe too. Okay. So this one's interesting for me because I've seen properties where the fridge, for example, they have the water dispenser and the water dispenser stopped working, so the landlord said, I'm not gonna repair that. I mean, that's something minor, but what if the fridge breaks and the landlord says, I'm gonna leave the fridge there, I'm not gonna repair it, I'll give you a small fridge, just enjoy, or the dryer breaks or dishwasher breaks.
So the landlord has a duty to maintain and repair.
Okay.
So they don't have to replace the fridge.
Got you.
They can provide a secondhand fridge, but it has to be the same size. It cannot be something that's smaller.
So you can't switch, like if the property when I was renting it came with a washer with a dishwasher, let's say, and the dishwasher breaks, you should be able to get the landlord is now responsible to replace the dishwasher.
They can repair it.
Or they can repair it.
Yeah, or they can provide a used one.
But they can't give you a small dishwasher that you put on the counter and say that's gonna
Correct.
stay and we're just gonna
No.
So you have to maintain the same level
That's
of
right.
service, let's call
Pretty
it.
much, because the tenant is paying rent.
For a full fridge.
You got it.
You can't give them a wine
You
fridge
got
and
it.
say use this instead.
So let me tell you, sorry, you can't give it one. So if a landlord does that, so let's say the landlord takes away a big fridge and provides one of the little ones, then the tenant can bring forward an application, basically for a rent abatement.
Okay.
To adjust the rent because what they were renting, the service that they were renting is now decreased.
Okay. All right.
Right, and they'll get it. They'll be successful at the board.
Okay.
Right, so it doesn't have to be a brand new appliance. It has to be.
You should be able to replace Okay.
You got
it. In that case, let's say the fridge broke because the tenant was moving it and it fell and it cracked and now it's not working, or they did something wrong to it. They didn't clean it. Would you be able to charge the tenant to replace the fridge or repair it, or is it always the landlord that?
That's a good question. This is an excellent question.
Okay.
If the tenant willfully and intentionally damages the fridge. Okay. Hammer.
They're upset. They want to break the microwave. Gotcha.
Yeah, or they pull the handle and that's intentional.
Okay.
Then that damage is caused by the tenant.
Got you. Okay.
But like you mentioned, cleaning.
Yes.
Remember, cleaning. The threshold at the board for cleaning is very low. Right. So if the fridge needs cleaning,
the landlord has to clean it.
The landlord's responsibility to maintain
Got you.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting one. Most landlords, all of my landlords, they appreciate getting paid by post-dated checks. Some tenants, and we're 2022 now, they don't have checks. They just want to send an e-transfer or do a direct deposit or whatever the other options are. However, the market's hot, so I've seen tenants just agree to anything. So let's say a tenant agreed to pay with post-dated checks, and then they got the keys, and the day they're going to get the keys, they said, I don't want to give you checks. I changed my mind. Now I want to pay you e-transfer. Can they do that?
Yes, they can. So a landlord cannot demand a particular method of a rent payment. Right. So if the tenant says, I'll give you post-dated checks, and then says, well, no, e-transfer, the landlord has to accommodate.
Okay.
Right. So they can't demand that form of payment.
Okay. And in a case where, let's say, we have closing today, we're gonna give them the checks. We show up, and the tenant shows up and says, "I changed my mind. I don't want to give you the checks." We say, "We're not gonna give you the keys, and we want to walk away from this. This is not what we've agreed to." Does the tenant have rights at that point? Because we haven't given them the keys yet.
Yeah, the landlord is in breach. Remember, what the law is and what is the contract. The contract, although the lease agreement, and the way I like to look at a lease agreement is the rules of the game.
Yes.
Who's the tenant, who's the landlord, the address of the property, what are the rules.
They're agreeing to, yeah.
But the law overrides what's in the
Any.
lease.
Okay.
And anything in the lease agreement that's contrary or inconsistent with the law is automatically unenforceable and void.
Okay. But if you look at the the residential tenancy agreement, the Ontario standard lease that we have, on it it specifies how the tenant is going to be paying the
Correct.
rent, and we do put post-dated checks on that one.
Yeah.
Is that not enforceable?
If the tenant changes the method, it's not enforceable.
Even before they get the keys.
Even before they get the keys.
So that's like not a breach because they have the right to change their mind.
Absolutely. Because the law, Section 108 of the Act, allows them to change their mind. Allows
pay any way they want.
That's correct.
Okay. Even they agreed to it, and we put it on the Ontario standard lease, and it says post, and they show up, they say, I don't want to give you checks. We still give them the keys and say, thank you so much. Okay.
Otherwise,
I thought
you're
we
in breach
have
of contract.
Right, and
Right?
that opens you up to some liability that you don't want
You
to.
got it.
Okay, some
You got it.
fines. Maybe we have to pay for their
You got it.
accommodation. Okay.
Which is what you want to avoid.
No, yeah,
Right?
we're not.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure if I have a landlord who says, "Oh, the tenant showed up, but they didn't bring the keys," should I tell them, "No, walk away from it right now. It's your right," or should I tell them, "Sorry, give them the keys and say thank you"?
All
right?
you can tell them is what the law says. Whatever they decide to do is up to them.
Absolutely.
Right?
I said in the video, we're not lawyers.
That's right.
If you want a legal opinion, you can contact advice. You can contact Vita for sure. So now this is another one. So the tenant moves in. In condos, usually you would ask the tenant to change the utilities to their name, hydro, heat, all of that. And in a house, sometimes if it's split, like we were talking, the main and the basement, the landlord might keep it under their name and send the bills to the tenants where they split and pay you back. So first question is, condo, it's under the tenant's name and they stopped paying. What happens?
If it's anything except for water, it follows them to the next property. It's in their name.
It's in their
If
name.
it's in the landlord's name, is that what you're asking?
If it's in the landlord's name, because let's say it's a house, they didn't change the...
If it's in the landlord's name and it's not paid, then it gets tacked onto their property taxes. So the landlord would have
The landlord would be
liable.
Okay.
And then the landlord would then have to pay it, bring an application through the board to recover unpaid utilities.
Unpaid,
Which is a bit of a pain. So make sure you get confirmation of the
names change. Okay. Got you. However, now that goes to the question, is that something enforceable? Like if we said the tenant would need to transfer the
utilities, yes.
It's
yes.
enforceable. So they show up, they don't have it yet. They haven't sent the confirmation. You can tell them, sorry,
I need proof of. That's
Got you.
correct.
Okay. So I don't know if you've seen what's going on in the market, but because of the interest hikes, we have another one today, 75 base points, right?
Oh, wow.
Bank of Canada, yeah. So I think a lot of people are being driven to rent. Buyers are being priced out of the market just because they can't qualify anymore. And I've seen tenants offer a full year up front. Now, that's great for the landlord. We love it. But is it something where, again, similar to the deposits that we've talked about, is it enforceable? Even if they agreed voluntarily to give the full year up front?
So you have to pay attention to the words.
Okay.
Anytime you're dealing with law,
Okay.
right? We really pick at the words.
Okay.
So if it's voluntary, then it can be argued that, they willingly paid. And therefore, bringing an application to request a refund
is a bit tough.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if it's a deposit, a request for a future deposit, or it was at the landlord's request, then the tenant can bring forward an application for a refund.
Right. So I'll do two scenarios then. Let's say the first scenario, I got an offer. I have a property for lease, and the tenant said in their email, or the other agent said, my client is looking to pay voluntarily the full deposit up front, the full year up front.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That should be okay.
Okay. Depends on the wording, but that should be fine.
Yeah.
Now, here's another scenario. Hey, we have a client, that's the other agent. I have a tenant, I want to rent your property. And then I said, we have 4 other applicants, we have 4 other offers. Can you do better? Would you pay a bit more upfront?
Right. And even then it goes to the wording of the clause.
Right.
Right?
Oh, it will be in the clause. If there's a text from me to the other agent saying, hey, the landlord's asking if you guys are happy to pay the full year up front, and they say, sure, we will voluntarily agree to pay the full upfront. That's
voluntarily is fine, because there's case law to persuade the board that a voluntary deposit was just that.
Just
it
that.
was voluntary, and it's not a deposit; it's voluntary
payment
prepaid
prepayment of rent.
Correct.
Right. Now, but my question there would be, what if the tenant argues that, hey, they were gonna pick somebody else, then they forced me to kind of voluntarily pay the whole year up front.
Then it's going to be up to the adjudicator at the board.
Right, so you're going,
right?
Okay, so as long as there's some wording that says voluntarily, they agree to pay.
You should be okay.
Unless it goes to court.
But this is not legal advice, so
no, do not. This
right?
video is for entertainment
for
purposes.
General information only.
Okay. So if you have any legal questions, you should reach out to Beta. That's the Stonegate Legal Services. All right, so this question is about the Ontario Standard Lease. So I've seen some landlords that didn't even know this existed. It was introduced maybe 2018, if I'm not wrong.
Correct.
So if you are doing a lease in Ontario, the government has their own lease. Most cases, residential, you'll be signing one of these. Okay. Now, in there, so if the tenant signs your lease, and we have very cool leases where there's a lot of things that are, now you're telling me not even legal, can't be enforced.
That's right.
And then the tenant says, hey, I want you to sign the Ontario Standard Lease. Can you send me one? And we say, we're not going to send you one. And then they end up preparing it and sending it to us. And the landlord says, there's things there that contradict the actual lease. I don't want to sign it. It makes no sense to me. Any recourse for the tenant? Anything liability for the landlord?
So let's talk about the Ontario Standard Lease. Mm-hmm. Okay, all residential tenancies in all of Ontario should use the Ontario Standard
Should
Lease.
use it.
Should use it. Everything that you need to include in a residential lease is already in there.
Right.
And I tell my agents all the time, guys, you don't need to add an appendix. You don't need to attach a Schedule A.
We're just doing it extra.
Yeah, it's so simple. Just fill in the blanks, right? Unless, and we spoke about the single family home, if you want to include house rules, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the main floor uses the laundry, the rest of the days the basement, like you can add house rules as an appendix. But really, the only lease that you need that has all of the clauses that are legal is the Ontario Standard Lease.
So it's good to use it.
It's great
Might as
to
well use it.
Absolutely.
But what if we don't want to because our lease is better?
Well, if it was better, the government would have approved it,
gotcha,
right?
Gotcha.
Now, if you think your lease is fine, you can use your lease.
Okay.
The thing is that if in your lease there are any clauses that contradict the law,
they mean nothing to anybody.
You got it.
Can the tenant, let's say, I don't know where I read this, but if you request in writing from the landlord or send them the Ontario lease and they do not provide you with with a signed copy back within 21 days, can the tenant withhold rent?
So let me just correct that a little bit. Okay. So it sounds like you're on the right track.
I read it somewhere. I don't know what it was.
If a landlord and tenant sign a lease,
yes,
and the tenant is not given a copy, if they request a copy from the landlord and the landlord doesn't provide one within 21 days, the tenant can legally withhold 1 month's rent.
Got you.
If they don't get provided with a copy within 30 days, the tenant does not have to repay that back.
Got you.
That's the law.
Okay, but you're saying if they sign the lease. So let's say we signed our lease, any lease. The standard lease has to also be then prepared and signed.
You got it. So just like how agents do Form 400.
Yeah, we have our form.
You start with Form 400, which is an agreement to lease.
Yeah, and I call it a tool to negotiate in this cases because I tell the landlords and even tenants, hey, this is just so that we understand what's happening in writing, and then we're gonna sign another lease.
You got it.
Which is the actual lease.
And that's what you should be telling your clients.
Okay, I'm doing it.
So you're doing
okay,
it right.
Thank
Keep
you.
doing it. That's what. So everybody follows suit. So everybody, that's what you should be doing.
Done.
Start off by Form 400, and then negotiate, and then put your Ontario Standard Lease together and attach them together.
Done.
There's your entire lease.
Full lease. Yeah, so in that case, if we do just the Form 400, but we did not provide with an Ontario Standard Lease, at that point, the tenant can say, where's my...
They can request one.
And then that's where what you said applies.
That's right.
Correct. Okay.
That's right.
Got you. Got you. If you guys are looking to get some more information, if you're looking to become an investor and buy your first property, or you're a landlord right now, you want to download the Landlord Mastery Guide from Stonegate, which is, I'll put a link in the description. Also, reach out to me if you're looking to buy an investment property so I can help you do that. Hopefully this video was informative. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.